1974, social psychologists uncovered a devastating truth about human behavior during interrogations. They found that suspects did not confess because of physical threats. They confessed because of the perceptual contrast principle. In criminal investigations, police deploy the good cop, bad cop routine. One interrogator acts like a raging tyrant, screaming and threatening. Then, the second interrogator steps in, speaks softly, and offers a cup of coffee. The contrast between the savage aggression and the sudden kindness is so blinding that the suspect's rational defense completely shatters. They drop their guard and hand over their freedom, entirely missing the fact that both the good cop and the bad cop are exactly the same predator playing them for a fool. Every single time you react emotionally to someone who disrespects you, you are falling for this exact same psychological trap. You think that by getting angry, explaining yourself, or defending your ego, you are showing strength. Elite social predators know the truth. Your reaction is a massive, exploitable concession. It proves that they have successfully manipulated your internal state and breached your walls. Listen to me very carefully. The unspoken rules of social hierarchies are shifting rapidly. The window of opportunity to build an impenetrable psychological armor against emotional parasites is closing faster than you think. If you choose to click away right now, you are mathematically guaranteeing a life of absolute submission, where toxic people will use your predictable reactions to drain your leverage every single day. But if you stay until the very end of this classified briefing, I will hand you the exact psychological blueprint to weaponize absolute apathy and command undeniable respect. Let us get one thing straight from the start. Nobody respects a willing victim who explains their choices. Weak people are utterly paralyzed by the fear of being misunderstood. Untouchable operators use that exact fear against the masses. They know that whoever cares the least controls the interaction. The scarcity of your attention. To master the dark art of calculated inaction, you must first understand the psychology of scarcity. In a famous experiment, researcher Stephen Wirtschel asked participants to rate the quality of chocolate chip cookies. For half the group, the jar contained 10 cookies. For the other half, the jar contained only 2. As the scarcity principle dictates, the cookies in short supply were rated as drastically more desirable and valuable. But the researchers discovered something even more fascinating. When a jar of 10 cookies was suddenly replaced with a jar of 2, those newly scarce cookies were rated the highest of all. Humans are mentally wired to obsess over things that are suddenly taken away from them. Right now, your attention, your words, and your emotional reactions are like that jar of 10 cookies. They are incredibly abundant and therefore utterly worthless. Every time a critic leaves a hateful comment, every time a toxic coworker starts drama, every time a manipulator casually steps over your boundary, you immediately hand them your attention. You argue, you negotiate, you try to prove them wrong. You are giving them your most valuable currency for free. Elite operators understand that they must make their reactions scarce. When you completely withdraw your emotional response and deploy absolute apathy, your perceived value skyrockets instantly. By strictly limiting access to your true thoughts, you trigger the scarcity principle in the minds of others. The social predator expects you to fight back, to defend your fragile ego. When you offer them nothing but a cold, unbroken silence, you suddenly become the scarce resource in the room. They will begin to crave your validation because it is no longer freely available. By refusing to react, you force the manipulator to realize that their compliance tactics are entirely ineffective. Your attention. The mind-breaking effect of ignoring. What actually happens inside the human mind when it is completely ignored? To answer this, we must examine the phenomenon of pluralistic ignorance, famously documented by psychologists Bibb Latané and John Darley after the tragic case of Catherine Genovese. When humans are placed in an ambiguous or uncertain situation, they experience intense mental friction. To resolve this panic, they desperately look around at the actions of others for clues on how to behave. If everyone else is calm, they automatically assume nothing is wrong. Covert manipulators rely entirely on this exact mechanism to control you. When they launch a verbal attack or attempt to undermine your status in public, they are creating an intentionally ambiguous situation. They watch your face closely, waiting for the social proof of your reaction. If you frown, if you raise your voice, if you rush to defend yourself, you give them the exact social evidence they need. You prove to the room that their attack was successful. But what happens when you deploy absolute apathy? You deprive them of all social proof. The human mind is desperately wired for closure. We need to understand cause and effect. When someone insults you and you respond with complete, dead silence, their thought process short-circuits. There is no closure, no explanation, no counterattack to push against. They are left in a terrifying vacuum of uncertainty. They sit there wondering if you even heard them, if you care at all, or if they just made a massive fool of themselves in front of the hierarchy. They begin to fight a psychological battle inside their own head, and you are not even on the battlefield. This is the Machiavellian power of not reacting. You force the predator to consume their own toxic energy. The silence becomes an open wound in their mind that never heals, eating away at their confidence. You do not need the last word. The last word is a concession. Silence is absolute dominance. Weaponizing psychological reactance. The true power of staying unfazed lies in a concept developed by psychologist Jack Brame, known as psychological reactance theory. This theory states that whenever a human being's free choice is limited or threatened, the need to retain that freedom makes them desire it obsessively. We see this in the classic Romeo and Juliet effect, where parental interference only fuels the fierce, irrational devotion of teenage lovers. When you restrict a freedom, humans go crazy trying to reclaim it. The exact same principle applies to social power dynamics. When you constantly react to manipulators' games, you are telling them that their access to your emotions is completely unrestricted. You signal that your doors are wide open, that they can pull your psychological strings whenever they please. But the exact moment you stop reacting, you sever that access. You impose a severe, unyielding restriction on their freedom to control you. According to reactance theory, this sudden loss of power will make them desire your engagement more than ever before. They will try harder. They will push old buttons, hoping for the old, predictable reactions. They will deploy the rejection then retreat tactic, starting with an extreme insult just to get you to offer a tiny apology or a brief explanation. But if you hold your ground and remain stone cold, their manipulation will turn into desperate panic. The individuals who command the highest status in any room are those who weaponize reactance flawlessly. They establish their emotional boundaries and let the restriction stand, refusing to dilute its power with a single word of regret. They understand that people only respect what is exceptionally difficult to manipulate. By remaining completely indifferent, you flip the power dynamic. The person who was trying to control you is now entirely controlled by your lack of response. You have trapped them in a prison of their own making. A fortress of foolish consistency. Why is it so impossibly hard for average people to simply walk away without saying a word? The answer is found in our obsessive need for consistency. Prominent theorists like Leon Festinger prove that humans have a relentless drive to appear consistent with their past actions. Once we adopt a social role, we encounter massive personal pressures to behave consistently with that label. For years, society has forced you to play the role of the defender. You have consistently explained your actions, justified your choices, and fought back when challenged. Now, you are sealed within the fortress walls of rigid consistency. The philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson famously warned that a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little mind. When someone attacks you, your mind automatically plays the old consistency tape. You feel a burning need to correct the record, to show them they are wrong, to protect your fragile ego. You apologize or argue not because it is effective, but because you are utterly terrified of breaking your own predictable, submissive pattern. Elite operators destroy this hobgoblin. They recognize that consistency to a weak, reactive identity is a fatal flaw. They understand the Machiavellian magic of the unwritten word. In the Korean War prison camps, interrogators knew that if they could just get an American soldier to write down a minor concession, the need for consistency would eventually break the soldier's entire identity. Every time you write a long paragraph defending yourself, every time you send an angry text message to a toxic friend, you are handing them the physical proof of your submission. You are putting your emotional defeat on paper. The truly powerful never explain their choices. They refuse to write the script of their own destruction. They embrace the asymmetry of silence, knowing that breaking their old reactive patterns is the first step to absolute freedom. Sending through calculated inaction. The ultimate psychological transformation requires you to master the dark art of calculated inaction. For decades, the famous Milgram experiments at Yale University demonstrated that ordinary people would blindly obey the symbols of authority, delivering lethal shocks to a screaming victim simply because a man in a grey lab coat told them to do it. They unhooked their intelligence and blindly obeyed the hierarchy. By constantly reacting to the judgments of others, you have handed them the lab coat. You have made them the absolute authority over your reality, blindly obeying their unspoken demand that you explain and defend your existence. You must rip that title away from them today. You must build an impenetrable armor of indifference. Indifference is not about being cold or emotionless. It is about having absolute, dictatorial control over what gets to affect you. The greatest operators in the world do not waste a single heartbeat trying to prove their worth to an emotional parasite. They understand that some battles are won not by fighting, but by refusing to show up. They deploy calculated inaction to let their enemies destroy themselves through their own toxic obsession. When you stop being the submissive reactor and start being the ruthless director of your own life, the manipulators will panic. They will call you arrogant, distant, and selfish. That is the beautiful, undeniable sound of the emotional parasite starving to death. We have reached the critical point of this classified briefing. I want you to analyze your own behavior right now. What was the exact moment you realized that defending your choices to people who do not matter was secretly bleeding your leverage? Answer this in the comments below. If this painful truth hit you exactly where it needed to, and you are finally ready to embrace the Machiavellian power of absolute apathy, drop the words, "stay unfazed," in the comments right now to prove you are killing the need to react today. Take back your power. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to master the dark psychology and warfare tactics the elite use to dominate every hierarchy. Stay cold, stay silent, and never apologize for your power.